Many assume multiculturalism is a recent phenomenon, but the reality is we've been here from the start. In the past, Black, African, British history wasn't covered. I know when I was in school, which is quite a while back now, there was very little. Many assume multiculturalism is a recent phenomenon, but the reality is we have always had an African presence in some shape or form. It may not be the numbers we have today, but as it says, we've been here from the start. So many were unaware of this long history of Black and African British history until the historian David Olusoga. Have we all heard of him? Good, yes, good. Many weren't aware of the contributions that had been made, and some British people feel uncomfortable with even recognising that there was a Black presence. Britain is, even though we don't like to think of ourselves in that way, is ultimately a nation of immigrants. If we look at the waves of migration throughout history, and we're not just talking about post-World War II, we're talking about going back to the Romans and the Saxons and the Vikings and the Normans and on and on and on. So there's always been people coming in and out. So really and truly, when we think about that history, we shouldn't really be surprised that people have come from not just Europe, but beyond. Cheddar Man. This is what the Cheddar Man would have looked like. So even though he is melanated, we can see his features are quite different to anyone's, like ours, Black people's, white people's. He does look quite different. Cheddar Man lived in the Mesolithic era. He was discovered in 1903 in Britain's oldest complete skeleton in the Goths Cave, Cheddar Gorge, Somerset, hence the name. The skeleton can be dated back to the 9th millennia BC. Nuclear DNA analysis reveals that he was a typical member of the Western European hunter-gatherer population at that time. Phenotype of blue-green eyes, black or brown hair, dark or dark to black skin. He was shorter than modern Europeans at 5'5" and weighed about 146 pounds. Natural history professor Ian Barnes has said, it's the combination of features that make him look not like anyone you'd seen today. So you're not really used to seeing that. But there are, outside of the Cheddar Man, there are some Black people that do have blue eyes, but it's a genetic condition, so you don't have many, but they do exist. DNA sequence extracted from his inner ear bone, genetic markers of skin pigmentation usually associated with sub-Saharan Africa. And his DNA has also been linked to individuals found in modern-day Spain, Hungary and Luxembourg, which suggests that it wasn't just him. Interestingly, it's estimated that only 10% of the genomes of modern white British people comes from this population. So basically they came and then they were displaced. But Bropey in 2018 noted that when the information surrounding Cheddar Man was revealed, many saw it as helpful repose to anti-immigration arguments and others felt it was fake, left-wing, politically correct propaganda. So there was a real kind of backlash to this view. Yeah, this is even before they found out, oh, it's only 10%. But people were not comfortable with thinking that this could have been their ancestor. So now we're going to look at African Romans. A lot of these Romans were North African, even though obviously the Arab invasion hadn't happened at that point, but they have a mixed ancestry, so we will say African Romans because they wouldn't be classified as Black. But we know Black is a political term that has only existed since the 70s, so it's a relative concept. So we're going to look at Septimus Severus, such an alliteration. Some have described him as a Black emperor, others will dismiss his blackness. So some have argued that he looks Black in the portraits only because at this point, when portraits were created, women were shown as paler, men were shown as darker. His wife was Syrian, so she was Middle Eastern. Okay, so look at the picture here. That's his wife, that's his second wife, because the first wife didn't have any children. He was from Syria, and that's his son, Carcacalla. Do you see a slight difference? Would you say the hues are the same? So as I said before, Black is quite a recent term, really used since the 70s. Prior to that, we had a whole host of other terms, but whether you want to say he was Black or he wasn't, he was clearly of African descent. One of the things I think we forget about Rome when we watch all the films is that it was far more diverse than many assume. And that was because of the scale of the empire and how many countries it colonized. So it spread from North Africa to India. So we have to think, if an empire that big couldn't have been a homogenous group, it couldn't have been. It's unlikely that Severus would have been classified as Black in the sense that we know it today, but he was most likely definitely of mixed heritage. He was Italian, Punic, Carthaginian, we now would call modern day Tunisia and Semitic. He was born in what we would now refer to as Libya in 0145. As a young man, he progressed through a succession of offices under the reign of Marcus Aurelius and Commodus, and I'm sure we've all seen Gladiator, so we know who he is.
Are you not entertained?
Entered the public office in 169 AD as his rise to power was aided by the plague. So basically, Lots of the political elite had been wiped out by the plague. That was his segue in. Who knew living during the pandemic was helpful to him? He was the final contender to seize power in 193 after the death of Pertinax. And this is the year what we call the reign of the 5 emperors. I think it reminds us of the time when we have about 3 PMs. Do you remember that year? Yeah, it was like that. He was the 13th Roman emperor and reigned from 193 to 211. History regards him as a good emperor who ushered in stability. But we know that history is written by the victors and it depends on who you're asking. Septimus Severus is also famous for forbidding conversion into Christianity and his brutality to the Scottish, then called the Caledonians. So if you're Scottish, you might not remember him in that positive way. But he did significantly expand the Roman Empire and it became the largest it ever was. Archaeological finds have discovered skeletal evidence for the black presence in Roman Britain, cities as diverse as York, Leicester and London, dating back to the 2nd and the 3rd century respectively, both North African and Sub-Saharan African, occupying a range of roles in society from soldiers to slaves. So this is the Beachy Head lady. See, she was discovered in Beachy Head. Initially when she was discovered, they suggested she was black, but later we find out that she is of Cypriot heritage. But there is another woman called the wealthy Ivory Bangle lady. In 2010, research revealed that she was a young lady between the ages of 18 and 23. She was a high-status female, approximately between 152 and 160 centimetres tall. She was of North African ancestry, spent her childhood in the west of Britain or coastal areas in Western Europe or the Mediterranean. She had links to Christianity, but the positioning of her grave suggests she was a pagan. So this one hasn't been discredited, but this is another one. We don't know how many more that we just haven't found. I think even looking at like Black British or Black African Roman history, it points to the fact that calling yourself black or the whole racial categories are actually quite a recent phenomenon. And in the past, we wouldn't have referred to ourselves in that way. So this whole idea of the difference is created, it's socially constructed. I mean, we know that, but I think if we sometimes need to remind ourselves, because at this point, they wouldn't even have used those labels that we're now giving them. There may be much more, but we just haven't discovered them because they wouldn't have even used that term.